Hello YouTube. So this is my second video on the subject of the United Nations, so I'll just get straight into it. The Security Council has 15 members, 5 permanent members. The permanent members, as you may well know, are Russia, China, the United States, France, and of course Great Britain, good old Blighty. The General Assembly elects the other 10 members to the Security Council, taking the maintenance of international peace and security into consideration, as well as equitable geological distribution. I think I'm right in saying that the non-permanent members are represented on the Security Council for terms of 2 years, and that they, the non-permanent members that is, are not eligible for immediate re-election. As laid down in the Charter, the Security Council is primarily responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. In fact, Article 24.1 of the UN Charter states that member countries confer this primary responsibility on the Security Council. Article 25 reads, "The members of the United Nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present Charter." So it's obvious who's in charge then, right? "The Security Council shall adopt its own rules of procedure, including the method of selecting its president," reads Article 30. In Chapter 1, Article 2 of the Charter, the first principle reads, "The organisation is based on the principle of the sovereign equality of all its members." So, my question here is, where is the equality? We have 5 permanent members, each with special veto powers. The Security Council can stop any potential reform or restructuring of the UN organisation. For as long as the permanent members of the Security Council reign supreme over the other member states, how can the General Assembly be regarded as anything more than a glorified talk shop? Now, Article 24.2 states that the Security Council shall act in accordance with the purposes and principles of the United Nations as laid down in Chapter 1, Articles 1 and 2. Article 24.2 goes on, "The specific powers granted to the Security Council for the discharge of these duties are laid down in Chapters 6, 7, 8 and 12. I mean, Chapter 1, Purposes and Principles, looks good on paper, and the objectives and aims set forth are truly admirable, but when I read it, I can't help but think of the Security Council, the so-called Security Council. Because of this private club, all people on the face of the earth are essentially hostages. In effect, we're all nuclear hostages. When I think of countries that respect the territorial integrity or political independence of other states, none of the permanent members of the Security Council spring to mind. The Security Council reigns supreme. Big Five are firmly in control. So, where is the cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character? Where is the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion? You know? Where's the respect? Anyway, in Chapter 6 of the Charter, the Security Council is authorised to make recommendations with regard to peaceful settlement of disputes, but the provisions to make binding resolutions are contained in Chapter 7. The Charter allows the Security Council to determine the existence of any threat to the peace, breach of the peace, or act of aggression. The Security Council holds the power to authorise military or non-military action to restore peace and security. Chapter 7 gives the Military Staff Committee, which is composed of Big Five's chiefs of staff, Chapter 7, yes, it gives the Military Staff Committee responsibility for strategic coordination of forces placed at the disposal of the UN Security Council. Now, Chapter 8 authorises regional bodies, like NATO, for instance, to attempt to resolve disputes prior to Security Council intervention. Article 53 states, "No enforcement action shall be taken under regional arrangements or by regional agencies without the authorization of the Security Council." What else is in the Charter that might be of interest to you folks? Well, Article 94 requires all member states of the UN to abide by World Court decisions, that court being the International Court of Justice, in any cases to which they are party, and gives the Security Council the power to enforce such decisions. Chapter 15 designates the Secretary General as the Chief Administrative Officer of the UN organisation. Chapter 16 prohibits secret treaties, which effectively establishes the Charter as the supreme world treaty, as it were. Now, Chapter 18 deals with amendments to the Charter. Excuse me. Apparently, the General Assembly can submit an amendment to the member states, or a convention can be called to propose amendments. For an amendment to be adopted, a 2/3 supermajority is required, and ratification by a supermajority of respective member states is required. The amendment procedure contains a provision that does not allow states to be deprived of their suffrage without their consent. I ask, could the United Nations organization be reorganized into a world government? Well, Article 108, that's in Chapter 18, states, amendments to the present Charter shall come into force for all members of the UN when they have been adopted by a vote of 2/3 of the members of the General Assembly and ratified in accordance with their respective constitutional processes by 2/3 of the members of the UN, including all permanent members of the Security Council. So, Big Five, or any one member of Big Five, can block any potential amendment to the Charter. Simple as that. How can anyone who sees this say that it's fair? The UN is controlled by a private club, a nuclear club in fact. 187 member states have to bow down to the will of the Supreme Security Council. As long as this unjust and undemocratic arrangement is allowed to persist, there will be no world government. Global political and economic union will remain just a pipe dream, Could the UN Charter, and thus the organisation, be reformed and restructured by a different method? Could the UN be radicalised and democratised by, say, an irresistible lobby movement or a mass movement of the peoples of Earth? The UN, as it is, does not provide leadership on the world stage. And for all the good things that certain UN agencies do, the organisation as a whole does not inspire confidence and hope, at least not in its present form. Many people, myself included, look at the state of international affairs as it is now and see that we really need a global political and economic regime with executive powers, legal powers, the means to empower the peoples of Earth, the ability to carry out the will of the people, and the integrity to uphold the best principles of humankind. Well, I hope that you found this video and the last one to be interesting and informative. I hope that that it maybe provoked some thoughts, because that's what it's all about really, challenging people's views and maybe hoping that you'll teach them something, So, thanks for listening and peace. Have a nice day, boys and girls.